the Cats and Bolts. 3, 2, 1.
Thank you, Benjamin Castro. Welcome to the Cats and Bolts podcast. It's true, Florida's favorite hockey podcast and awarded Florida's fastest growing podcast too, by the way. And I think it's because of the guests that we have here on Cats and Bolts live to you from Podcast Junkie Studios. Our guest brought to you by Beach House Pompano and Beresco. Doug Maclean joining us, coach to the stars, Florida Panthers, not the original coach, but some will say the best, 1995 to 1997. Welcome back, Mac.
Yeah, thanks. By the way, Rimmer got the gift certificate from you, and he told me it cost him so much to park and so much for gas that he lost money on the gift certificate.
He would be keeping track of that.
Oh, no, he is the cheapest son of a gun you've ever met in your life. But anyway.
Were we doing it this early? We're doing it? Because point one of my 10 points is I don't care what Jeff Rimmer says about you. I like you, Doug.
So,
I think you're a good guy.
I'll tell you what's going on.
I don't care what he says.
It's been a tough month for Rimmer, really tough, because Sam Rosen, as you noticed, is being honored at every building around the league. And Rimmer is distraught that Sam is getting more notoriety than Rimmer had on his one-year tour. And most people hardly knew him. And he had this tour that he sort of set up, you know. So he's just devastated by the accolades for Sam Rosen. So anyway, he'll get over it.
Sam Rosen, the legendary New York Rangers broadcaster in his final season. But I'll say it again. I don't care what Rimmer says about you, Doug. I think you're a real good guy.
Yeah, I know.
We all need friends like that, don't we?
You know what? He's been a friend for a long time. And really, and I think back about why we were friends is because I hired him like 3 times. You know, I remember with the Panthers here, he was all upset because, you know, it was during the lockout and they were paying him $200 a week. And he phones me and he's crying on the phone. So I said, well, I'll hire you in Columbus. Then he spends 20 years in Columbus and I get fired and he keeps his job. Like, what a joke. But anyway, he's a great guy, a great friend, but he is the biggest name dropper that you've ever experienced in your life. But anyway.
Speaking of, go ahead.
Except for one. Because before the show, we were having a conversation about Bobby Orr. And I said, when are you going to get Bobby Orr in here for us? And the first thing out of your mouth was, Rimmer's better friends with him.
Well, look, if you want Bobby Orr on this podcast, I would guarantee you, if Rimmer wanted to, he could get him, because he tells me that Bobby is one of his best friends. So I've got to believe Rimmer could get him on this show. So I would push Rimmer and just say, hey, you keep telling us how big you are in the game, you know.
I'm gonna roast him so bad next time.
Can you imagine Rimmer's Rolodex? By the way, Muhammad Ali is in there. Bobby Orr.
Well, no, it's his son's Rolodex, Josh's, and Rimmer uses it. He gets all the numbers from Josh.
Before we get down to, we're talking to, you all know this, the original Florida Panthers voice, Jeff Rimmer, who was like our first guest this season that we had. This is now season 2, episode number 18. But do you want to, before we get into the hockey talk, defend yourself on the Mario Lemieux story?
Oh, that was embarrassing. But you know what? It's so bizarre. I'll tell you exactly the truth. He screwed it up a little bit because I heard the clip on it. So Jack Armstrong, I'm not a name dropper, but Jack Armstrong's a friend of mine. And he lives in Delray. And I got him actually to buy a place, he and his wife Dina. So anyway, Jack and I are out playing at their course, Seagate Golf Club. And we're playing, and there's this couple pushing us from behind. And we had another guy with us. We didn't know who he was, but we stopped at 9. We said, hey, let's let this couple go by. So they pull up in the golf cart next to us, and this guy's got his sunglasses on, hat, and he goes, hey, Mac, how you doing? And I said, excuse me, do I know you? And he takes off his hat and glasses. It's Mario, for Christ's sake, Doug. Like, seriously.
Didn't need a last name. There's only one.
I was so embarrassed. It was unbelievable. I just watched a special on him the night before on the Penguins game about him battling back from leukemia and challenging for the scoring race. And I'm thinking, Mario, I just watched it. Anyway, I felt like an idiot. But anyway, he had the glasses and hat on, and Rimmer made it sound like I was an egomaniac, but it was the fact that I didn't recognize him. But who would ever think you'd run into Mario playing golf, you know?
I gotta, it's cool that you're defending yourself. I love you. By the way, I have your book in my book bag, my backpack. I'll get it. I'd like you to sign it on the air. I forgot. I was so excited to get you in here. Yeah. I asked our viewers if they had any questions or comments for you.
Yeah.
And can we go down that road? We might get to hockey today. This is good, babe. Kelly Francis writes in. She says, I met him downtown Delray one night years ago. I talked for a few hours with him and his wife. He ended up paying for my dinner. I had just become a full-time single mom to 2 really young kids. Made me tear up when the bartender told me what Dougie did. He waited till Doug left to tell me. Do you remember that?
I vaguely remember that. That's nice.
a good one.
That's nice to hear. Well,
Sarah.
I hope she's doing well.
Sounds like she watches the show every day. She must be doing great.
Yeah,
and
that's
clearly
great.
smart. Sarah writes in. She says,
There's a lot of women writing in,
I know.
It must be the
Has to be the
good-looking
host.
guys on the show.
Sarah says, can you please tell Doug how appreciated he was? I was at every game in the 90s, including the Stanley Cup final in 96, and he was always my favorite. I can't wait to hear the podcast. I judged the entire series on Doug's ties. Sorry to say, Game 4, ugly tie. We know how that ended. That's from Sarah.
Ugly clothes. When I see the clips, they're kind of ugly
I
clothes.
thought they were great. Double-breasted. I
funny.
liked it, man. Okay,
Anyway,
over to you. You want to
nice.
talk hockey.
I appreciate those nice comments from those
Absolutely.
people. Very nice.
What I love the most is that's the best part about hockey. That is the stuff that stands out to people. Somebody may not even be a huge Panthers fan right now, but the fact that you bought some lady's dinner and she still remembers it to the point she brings it up, it's incredible.
It's so crazy about the Panther run is that everywhere I go in Canada, it still comes up. If I meet somebody, they say, "Oh, the Rats, the Rats." It's so bizarre that series and that year. It has been ingrained in so many young, even that were kids, and now adults. But it was an amazing run. As a matter of fact, I just got an envelope this week from a former mayor of Summerside, my hometown, and he sent me a package. And when we finished the season, Wayne Huizenga, we're getting the team picture, and Wayne says, "When are you going home?" to me, and I said, "Oh, we've got flights tomorrow morning." Back to PEI, and we're taking the family back. And he said, no, I'm flying you back. So he sends Greg Boris, who was our PR guy, to PEI a day before with 500 T-shirts and 500 hats. However, Greg got them there. And we fly on Wayne Huizenga's private jet with the Rat on the back wing. And Greg went there, and the town had organized a parade and a huge event at the Silver Fox Curling Club. So we land in Summerside. So I got like 100 pictures from the mayor of Summerside this week showing my kids who were 9 and 6 at the time, and us getting off the plane and the parade and the function. It brought back so many memories.
That's
it's
awesome.
Unbelievable, yeah. Funny how weird I'm on here, and I just got this package, so it's pretty funny.
Yeah, there are no coincidences, as they say. Okay, to hockey, and we'll come back around on this. Connor McDavid's suspension. I went 12 rounds with Rod Black today. You would know that name.
Yeah.
You wouldn't, but iconic Canadian broadcaster. He says the NHL got it right. She's the biggest Oiler fan I know, and she thinks the NHL got it right. I'm saying he's defending himself. He's frustrated. He's being abused and harassed. He's not your average player. He's got to do something. And I thought it was too much. 3 games for Connor McDavid. I'm sure you all saw it. What did you think?
You know what? I think Connor and the Oilers are a little bit right that they've got to protect the stars. They do it in every sport, and they've got to protect the stars to a degree. I've known Connor Garland since he played for the Moncton Wildcats, and he's an antagonizing little guy you know what he did and grabbing them and holding them, keeping them down in the slot, I didn't like, but you can't cross-check somebody in the face. That's the bottom line. You cannot cross-check anybody in the face. And when you do that, it's wide open. Did it have to be 3 games? Well, they were going to give Myers 3, They were going to give them 3. The other altercation that happened with Boucher right in the same event, essentially. So I didn't, you know what? I think they have to protect it. I said to somebody the other day, I was with Yzerman for 5 years in Detroit. I never saw him ever get abused the way McDavid does, ever. And you know why? Probert was there, and Kosher was there, and Gerard Gallant was there, and it didn't happen. And we've got away from that, and self-policing, and the game's changed, and you can't hit somebody in the face. So it's hard to defend them. It really is.
Okay.
It's
Here we
hard to
go.
defend them. And I'm the biggest Connor McDavid fan. This guy has got one thing on his mind, and that's to win the Stanley Cup. That's all he's got on his mind is to win the Stanley Cup, whereas a lot of other superstars in the league are more excited about getting a clothing line, or the cover of GQ. Like, this guy wants to win. And, we'll see.
The day that Gary Suter blatantly cross-checked Paul Kariya in the face in front of the net, he got a 4-game suspension. I said, you can't cross-check somebody in the face. And I've seen McDavid, obviously as an Oilers fan, get abused. And you're right, he takes more than anybody I've ever seen. And, for years, he never said a word. He just put up with it. He put up with it. What people don't realize, he's been putting up with this abuse for 10 years. And I still agree with you. You can't cross-check somebody in the face. However, the Bouchard thing was completely unprovoked. And in my opinion, that's a 5-game suspension if the other one's a 3.
Yeah. And the other thing with McDavid is he doesn't draw penalties. That's the bizarre thing. I think I read somewhere this week he's 97th in the league in drawing penalties. And this is unheard of for a guy that has the puck as much as he has, that you don't draw. Connor McDavid should draw a ton of penalties, because of the way you're trying to defend him. And defend him in a game, defend him from scoring and defend him from making plays. And he doesn't. And that, to me, tells you a lot about Connor McDavid's game, that he fights through a lot of stuff. Yeah.
I also feel, too, though, that with the Garland situation, if a penalty would have been called when a penalty should have been called, we saw a hooking penalty on Connor Bedard the other night that was an absolute embarrassment. Yeah. He was chasing down Brent Burns. Well, Brent Burns is 5 times as big as he is, but the penalty was terrible.
And it was in the slot, and I don't know how it wasn't called, but that's just, I'm not, that's refereeing.
I can't stand the officiating discussion. I really can't.
I know.
But, okay, so the last time you were here, you said you wanted Paul Maurice to break your record. And he did.
Yeah.
Now, most wins in the playoffs by a Panthers.
Did I really say that?
Yeah, we have it. We have it on tape. So you did. Yeah, the eye in the sky doesn't lie.
It only took 27 years to break it. That was like Gretzky-ish,
Yeah, but I'm just wondering.
That's what I was thinking.
We talked about this last week. What's Paul Maurice's challenge? Because for his 25, 26, 27 years in the league, it was to win the Stanley Cup. Then he did. Mm-hmm. So how does he? Is it keeping them interested, engaged? What is it?
You know what? I was thinking about it on the way down because I thought we'd touch on the Panthers, and I look at their team, and they're missing some. Bobrovsky hasn't been as good. Number one, he's been good, but he hasn't been stand on your head good. Is one thing, and Montour, Ekman Larson are big holes on the back end. Big holes on the back end. Sam Bennett not being signed and sitting out there as an unrestricted free agent is probably. I mean, I think he got his first goal in 20 games here recently. I think so. I think there's some things that are a little off there with him. The holes on the blue line are tough. Ekblad hasn't been as good. The blue line, to me, isn't good enough right now to win the Stanley Cup. What do they do with Bennett? Do they sign him? Do they trade him for a high-end D? That's going to be really interesting to watch what they do. They're still a contending team. They've still played really well. I think the Leafs are going to be a lot tougher this year in the playoffs. I think it could be an unbelievable. I don't see anybody else other than the Leafs and the Panthers on that side. I really don't see anybody else challenging. So it'll be a war. And Toronto are a little better focused. Berube's brought a little more grit. Their goaltending with Stolarz, who's injured, and Wall, who have been exceptional. They'll be tough. That would be a great series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing that the fans want to talk about usually too is the Lightning here. And when we came into this season, it was always what's going to happen, what's going to go on with the Lightning. Just talk a little bit about what you feel you've seen from the Lightning this year that maybe you weren't expecting or what you were expecting.
They haven't been as good, for sure. Vasilevsky wasn't great early on. When I say he and Bobrovsky aren't great, because I expect them to be elite of the elite, and both of them haven't been, in my opinion. Good, good, but not winning. Well, they've won games. There's no denying that, but they've got to be on top of their game. Their blue line in after their top 3, 4 is questionable for me. Their depth up front is questionable for me. I don't have the Lightning as a contender. I don't. And I watched them play the other night. They're still good. They're still very good. I mean, how can you not be with Hedman? I mean, Gensel is a star for them. Point, Kucherov, they're so darn good. I may be wrong on this, but I don't have them with the Leafs or the Panthers right now.
I don't know whose broadcast you were watching of that Habs Lightning game. I was watching the Tampa broadcast. They were talking about the Four Nations Faceoff. And as you know, already they are.
Yeah.
And we just came back from Chicago, and I was with Grant Mulvey. He
Wow.
basically looked at me with this look.
That's a name for me.
Right. Granny, as they call him. He looked at me and he goes, this Four Nations Faceoff is for global hockey supremacy.
Yeah.
Minus Russia.
Yeah,
What do you
minus
think?
Russia. I think it's, look, if I was a coach or a GM, I'd be a basket case, worrying about losing my stars down the stretch in February. Like if I'm Toronto and I've got Matthews sitting there when you already got Tavares injured, and, I would be scared to death at Stars because they are going to, when you put that Canada jersey on and the U.S. jersey and the countries, you're a different player. You're possessed, and you're right. It's going to be a war, and I'm excited about it as a hockey fan, but as a hockey person, I wouldn't be if I was in management. I'd be nervous, because the guy, every player in that tournament is a not a franchise player, but the best of the best is what they are. And there's really good teams. You look at Sweden's blue line, and you look at Finland, and Canada and the U.S., we know how great both those teams are. It's going to be spectacular hockey.
I think the one interesting thing, speaking about being a GM basket case for Canada, we probably have, as a nation, 50 guys that could easily make that roster. And we're very fortunate that way. Yeah. What do you think about Canada's choices to maybe put like a Reinhardt and a Bennett on the team? I'm not saying they don't deserve to be there, but there's probably 50 guys. What do you think Canada's style was mentally heading into choosing that team?
Well, you got to be careful when you're putting these teams together, and because it's people say we want grinders and we want role players on these teams, and I think back to the great Olympics, especially 2010. I was in Vancouver and watched that. It was so amazing. But you can't be obsessed with having specific types of players on your team, because when players put that Canadian jersey on or American jersey, they are talented enough that they will fill the role that's required of them. If you're like think back of the Getzlaffs and the Perrys and some of these other guys, the Bergerons that were stars, and go on these teams and play on the fourth line, and they do the job, or an Aginlo or any of these guys that were stars, Sid. But so I think you've got to go with the best, but you still are trying to build a team, but the guys will adapt, and that's what happened with Team Canada. They wanted to go with a certain type in the juniors, and they forgot that element that guys, if you're a stud, if you're talented, if you've got ultra talent, you can adjust your game to fit the role that's given to you. That's my belief anyway. So.
I got to ask you, you talk about the injuries to star players potentially, and here's hoping that doesn't happen in the Four Nations Faceoff. But of the 4 major sports, NHL, NBA, MLB, NFL, as you know, hockey's the most volatile for coaching. And you've been fired a few times. We've all been fired. But statistics say it's more volatile now than ever. Why do GMs and owners not give a guy a little grace? Injuries are a big one, but
mainly when it happens, 95% of the time, it's the owner telling the GM to fire the coach. Every time I fired a coach, I was told to fire the coach, and you cannot. When I fired Dave King in Columbus, I got ripped because everybody said I wanted to coach. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? So I got a call 11 o'clock at night. We lost 5-0 at home to Nashville. The barber had been in Mr. McConnell's ear. The accountant had been in Mr. McConnell's ear. Everybody was in. And he phoned me at 11 o'clock at night. I'm sitting in my office after the game with Bob Strum was sitting with me, your buddy, and he phoned. He said, "Fire the coach in the morning." And who's going to coach, Mr. McConnell? And he said, "You are." And I said, oh, great. So now I'm the president, I'm the GM, and the coach. He thought I was like running a Pee Wee AAA travel team. And it was like, are you kidding me? So that's typically the owners, when they start getting abused by their buddies and their country club friends and their techie buddies, it's the number one thing that causes coaches to get fired. And and the fans, the media, the fans rebel, and it becomes unbelievable, really. The pressure on coaches, GMs, and owners get to hate coaches really fast. They don't get to hate GMs quite as fast, but they get to hate coaches fast because everybody's in their ear about the coach. And you know what? It changes teams. Like I watched Detroit. Everybody's on raving about the new coach.
The Todd father, they're calling Todd.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, where is it now? It went for 7 or 8 games, and now they're back to can't win a game. Yeah. So, you know what? And Todd, the thing I get the kick out of is, Todd Maclean is going to bring accountability to the Red Wings. Accountability. That's the big word every time a coach is fired. Accountability. So then Todd was fired in Edmonton and LA because they didn't think he was making the players accountable. So now he's the new accountability guy. And I like Todd. He's a good coach. But, I mean, look, you need talent. And coaches pay a big price. I mean, Jill and I, it was kind of funny. We're living in our place in Delray is the 29th house we've lived in since we've been married. 29th home. So that tells you how much you bounce around. Now, that I didn't get fired every year, but the first year we'd move to a city and we'd rent. The second year we'd buy, and the third year I'd get fired. And then we'd go to the next city and I'd rent, buy, and get fired. So, I mean, it catches up to you. You have a lot of homes,
I think you asked me why I came to Florida the last time we chat. I'm done with it. And in the book, you said your daughter hoped you lost against Pittsburgh in Game 6.
7.
Yeah, I hope you lose, Dad.
She wanted
him home.
Yeah.
What was she, 3?
I phoned her from the hotel, and she said, Dad, we were playing in Pittsburgh Game 7. She said, Dad, what happens if you lose tonight? I said, honey, if we lose tonight, I'm coming. I'll be home tomorrow. And she said, I hope you lose. So anyway.
And what was she, was 3?
She was 3 at the time.
So that's proof I read it.
Yeah.
Let me just say, by the way,
that's good,
Doug, this is a forensic account of the NHL draft. I could tell your parts that you wrote and Scott Morrison, because yours were the stories.
Yeah.
His was like the accounting line by line.
Yeah. Scott was unbelievable, and we had worked together, and he's a great friend, and we became greater friends with this. But I'll tell you what happened. So I get this gig to write this book, and I really didn't want to do it. They phoned me and said, we want you to write a book, Simon & Schuster. And I said, well, I'm not really interested in writing a book, because I had, Keenan wrote his book and Berkey wrote. And they said, oh, no, we want it on the draft. And then that changed. I said, oh, okay, on the draft. So that was great. So I start, and I'm sitting by the pool and on the beach and at the cottage, and I write the first 8 chapters on my iPad. And I send it to Scott. And I'm there, and I'm not a typer, but I did it on my iPad, and I did notes on my phone and notes and scribble. And I sent it to Scott, and Scott phones me, and he said, do you not use paragraphs when you write? 8,000, there was 25,000 words in one straight line that went to him when I sent it to him. And I phoned my daughter, I said, what the hell happened? It went in a straight. She said, Dad, you got to change the settings on your iPads and put it into paragraph. So Scott, what the hell have I got myself into? So Scott said, so anyway, he did a great job. He's a great guy. And I've just been approached by Simon & Schuster to do another book. They really want to, we're talking, just started to talk about, they wanted me to do something on free agents, and I don't think there's enough, but I think there might be something there about a day in the life of a general manager. Like dealing with players, agents, coaches, fans, media, the free agency, the draft, everything about the role of a GM. So I'm just thinking about it. But I really, it was a ton of work.
Well, people are loving this because it was the last copy available at the Barnes & Noble on Glades. The last one.
Yeah,
so they're digging it.
It was a bestseller in Canada, and it went to paperback, which is a good sign. So I was really, you're right, Scott did a great job, and we had fun doing it, but it was like a 3-year project. It was crazy.
There's no easy way to write a book.
No.
But I will say, when you talked about stories from the draft floor, I got this, like tingles. Yeah, like Montreal, doesn't matter.
Some people find that when they buy the book and read it, they don't have to use as much melatonin at night.
Put you to sleep.
Yeah.
Like I said, forensic. Did I mention forensic?
It can put you to sleep.
That is actually not true because I would be in the kitchen. Rod's like reading. He's like, listen to this. Listen to what Doug
you know?
said.
Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, and he'd just read me half the book. It's like, wow, that's really
Well,
good.
that's good to hear because, so as some people will say to me, I said, I'll give them a book or send them a book, and I said, what do you think? And they said, a lot of names in it.
Do you have an audiobook?
No.
So I've been listening
Can
to
you read it to us?
Yeah, if you could just sit here. I have been listening to The Game by Ken Dryden. I've been listening to his audiobook.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. It's in his voice. He does it. But just hearing stories that I never knew that only Ken Dryden would know.
The Game, it's
The Game.
Famous book.
Yeah.
Famous book. by Ken.
Fantastic. He talks about things in the locker room and this person. And it's funny because it's such a different time. It's like Lapointe came in and drank his Coke. You guys wouldn't be drinking Coca-Cola in the locker room right now.
I used to love when I was a associate coach and assistant coach in Detroit where we had the smoking room off the dressing room where Proby and about 4 guys would go in and smoke the cigarettes in between periods. I think, what is going on here?
So it wasn't a designated smoking room. They made it a smoking room.
They made it a designated smoking room.
Because it is a Florida NHL show and you talked about the owners, sounds like you kind of liked Wayne Huizenga.
Yeah, Wayne Huizenga was a great owner. I never really, not that I ever talked to him very much other than we'd go up and play at his golf course at the Floridian, and he and Marty were around the team a fair amount. I'll never forget, Jack Nicklaus used to sit with him at the games in the playoffs. And Torrey comes in to me one day, Bill, and said, Wayne had some tips for you. And I said, really? Wayne's got tips? That's unusual. He said, yeah, Jack Nicklaus was helping him with coaching here the other night. And I said, oh, my God, tell Jack that helped me with my drive. Don't worry about my coaching. But Wayne was, he was a good guy. I'll never forget, though, I think year 3 or 4, whatever it was, we were struggling, and he said, Wayne's we went to the Stanley Cup Finals, and the next year he expected us to win the Cup. He really did expect us to win the Cup. And we had a great year after that. We had 94, 95 points, and we lost to the Rangers, which were a hell of a team, the Rangers. And he was not happy. Because he just thought it was a little bit like the NFL, where if you're right there, the next year you should take the step, But he was a passionate fan. And he was great to me. I mean, I'll tell you what. We finished the Stanley Cup run, and I got a call from Brian Murray, the GM at the time. And he said, Wayne wants to. I was in my first year, and he said, Wayne wants to tear up your contract. Gave me a $50,000 bonus. Gave me 50,000 shares in Boca Resorts that they had just started, and a new 4-year contract. And I'm thinking, whoa, like this is, and it was Wayne that initiated that, which, but I'll tell you even a better story. So Boca Resorts was his hotel group. He had extended stay and a bunch of things was the thing. And at one point it was worth a ton of money. So when I got fired, I had like 20,000 of my 40,000, whatever it was, half of, my shares that were, you had to be there long enough to get them. So I cashed out, never thought a thing of it. 5 years later, I get a call from Bill Torrey, and I'm in Columbus. I get a call, and she said they're closing down Boca Resorts, and Wayne was doing a list of, people that he wanted to send checks to because they were shutting it down. And he said he wants your address. I got a check for over $100,000 from Wayne Huizenga because I wasn't owed them, I wasn't due them. he just, when they were closing down the company, he sent me a check for $103,000. Like, who does that? I mean, I wrote him a letter and I said, Wayne, I can't believe you did that. I'm blown away by that. And, it was a ton of money. He sent back is one note. You deserved it. All the best, Wayne.
Wow.
That's what he said. So that's the kind of guy Wayne was with that team, that Panther team in the late 90s.
Well, it's a close group, man, as you know.
Oh, they really are.
But I think him as the blockbuster guy. He's far more than the blockbuster guy.
Oh, man, he was
everything.
He was everything. He really was. He was so far ahead of his time. And watching the blockbuster movie, when the end of it and all, and watching Wayne move out of blockbuster at the most critical time you could have moved out, sold out, and I mean, he was way ahead of his time, no doubt about that. And Marty she was a big hockey fan. She was a huge hockey fan. She loved Stewie Barnes and oh my God,
who doesn't?
Poor Brian, trading him. As I said in the book, even Clark said, "Are you guys dummies?" He was 9 at the time, and Clark knew we shouldn't have traded him.
He was great.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah.
What do you foresee for the league coming into the playoffs this year? I know you mentioned Toronto, the Panthers. Talk a little bit about the West, because I believe that the West is stronger overall, teams-wise, but talk to me who you think is going to be a contender in the West and why.
You know what? It's going to be Vegas. Is going to be. I'm going out to Vegas next week, and I'm actually going to the Blue Jacket Vegas game. I'm anxious to see Vegas play. They are a playoff style team. Health will be a real interesting issue with them, but they play. Kelly McCrimmon has done an amazing job with being GM of the Vegas, with a plug-and-play style where he brings guys in, he manipulates the cap, he does a good job. George McPhee's a good friend of mine, and I've talked to him quite a bit lately, but I think Vegas are going to be a really tough team to play against. Really tough team to play against. Big blue line, big goaltender who comes up, Hill comes up big, Thompson's a big loss, playing great in Washington. Maybe the best trade of the summer is Washington picking up their other goaltender. But I think Vegas will be tough. Eichel's a superstar. Stone, he'll be there. I think they will be tough. Winnipeg is going to be interesting. Can Hellebuck finally fight through at playoff time? Are they big enough on the back end? I really like them up front. Velarde, kid, has been really a good addition for Winnipeg up front on the big line. I'd love to see Winnipeg find it. I still believe Edmonton win the West. I do. I think they'll win the West. LA's a good team too, which people don't ever talk about. So I see Edmonton winning the West.
Can I ask you again, folks? You know that he's big into building teams. Kelly McCrimmon. I saw an interview with him where he says we're not doing anything different in the NHL than what we were doing in the Western Hockey League.
Yeah.
Is that true?
You know what? I like the fact that Kelly, and I got to know Kelly because I had Brad in Detroit for 4 or 5 years.
That's his brother,
who was killed tragically in a Russian plane crash in the first game he was coaching in the KHL. And Brad was a great defenseman. Kelly never played, but Kelly was a lifer in the Western Hockey League as a manager and owner of the Brandon Wheat Kings, and built really good teams. And to me, you look at the GMs across the league and who has paid their dues to get to the NHL. Nobody has paid the dues more than what Kelly McCrimmon did. And I don't know how many years he was in Brandon, from coach to owner to general manager. He paid his dues and finally gets an assistant GM job. And, George McPhee saw how talented he was. And he's done a great job keeping them there from day one as a top team in the league. That's hard to do. It's almost impossible to do. And from year one to year whatever it is, they've challenged every year.
He did it in Brandon, so he must be right. I consider you played Montreal Junior Canadiens. He played for Brandon.
Yeah.
Trust me, I followed the story.
Yeah.
And he weaseled his way in there as assistant coach and then became the owner. I don't get it either.
I know.
But I just said, as long as he's in Vegas, they're going to have a contender. Those fans are lucky.
And it's all about one thing in Vegas, and that's not rebuilding, not retooling, winning. winning. And that's what I say about the plug and play, how he's found guys and plugs them into that lineup. And I'm thinking, wow, and I love how he's built the blue line. Injuries are always tough because they play hard. They play a tough style game. So we'll see. But
one more for Doug from you.
Well, I just like to talk about Kelly McCrimmon because I could talk about him all day. Yeah. And I think that a guy that knows how to build a junior team where there's not money involved, and you really got to pick the talented guys.
You know what? It's funny. When Edmonton were looking for a GM this past spring, I thought for sure that Mark Hunter was getting the job. Mark has been the GM of the London Knights for as long as I can remember. I coached him and Mark in St. Louis years ago, and he was a really good player, and he's gone on to be an amazing junior operator with the London Knights. He and Dale run the franchise. Dale, the coach, Mark, the GM. I thought for sure he was going to get that job. Had a run with Toronto, and Toronto made a decision to go with Dubas ahead of Hunter. Not sure that was the best move. But anyway, there's some great junior operators. There's some great junior GMs in the league. There's guys that have been my son was talking to George Burnett last week, who's been a junior coach, major junior coach, GM, and now he's in Guelph, have been there for their whole careers, and he got a chance in Edmonton, a short stint, Cape Breton, American League short stint, but he's been a lifer. So, look, building a team in major junior is not that different than building an NHL team. It really isn't. You still got to find the
That's what Kelly
talent.
was saying, yeah. Well, you just mentioned a name. I won't repeat it again. You folks can pick it up. You took a few digs at people in here, which subtle. You were like, I bet they wish they had that pick again. Which I thought was hilarious. You said, yeah.
Yeah. You know what? I got a call after I wrote the book from Jimmy Devellano, okay? And I thought, I see the phone ring, because I gave Jimmy a couple of little shots in there, but minor. So Jimmy phones me. He's Doug, Jimmy Devellano here. Of course, I knew who it was. I just want to tell you, I loved your book. I thought it was terrific. I loved your book, and you were very kind to Ken and I. Very kind to Ken and I, and he said, "But you know what? You were very kind to people that I know you don't like." So Jimmy D, it was the best call on the book you could ever get because he doesn't pull any punches. And, I've been around Jimmy D for a long time, and I really, really appreciated his thoughts on the book because that was his life. Draft day was Jimmy Devellano's life. Even as a GM and as a vice president, he loved draft day, and he's a hockey icon. So it was kind of fun to get the call, but I didn't. You know what? I was kind of careful not to give shots.
It wasn't mean-spirited.
Yeah,
it was
the book
not.
wasn't about giving shots. It really wasn't, and because I know how tough draft day is and how many mistakes are made. And I said in there about drafting Gilbert Brulé. I mean, 6 overall, and I've been roasted for ever since 2005 or whatever it was that I didn't take Kopitar. And I took Brulé at 6 and Kopitar went 11. And I've been ripped, and still in Columbus they bring it up. It's unbelievable. So Nick Kiprio said to me one day on the radio on Nick's show in Toronto that I do every Friday, by the way, and he said, "What do you think it cost you taking Brulé over Kopitar?" And I said, "I think it probably cost me about $30 million personally, because if I would have taken Kopitar, I'd still be a GM." Yeah. And you know what? It's probably the truth, but funny, I got a call the other day, or a text from Gilbert Brulé that he just picked up the book.
Oh, great!
And I said, "Oh, you'll get a kick out of that. It'll help you sleep at night." And he said, he thought it was like because I'd given him a shot. And I said no, because I was this guy was the Sid Crosby of the
Vancouver
West.
Giants legend.
He was so damn good.
Everybody would have taken Brulé. If anybody comes in and says they would have taken Kopitar, come on.
I got a great draft story, and I think it's in the book there. When Montreal took Price at 5, it threw us for a loop. We had Price in the second round, and so did everybody else, Carey Price. And they took him at 5, and Pierre Maguire, the hockey genius, was on the TSN broadcast, and he went ballistic. How can the Montreal Canadiens do this to their fans? How can they take Carey Price ahead of Gilbert Brule? This is unbelievable. They would do this to their fans. And then 4 years later, I'm listening to him in Ottawa ripping me for taking Brule. You know, and I'm thinking, you son of a bitch. Anyway,
He
You
is
wish
one.
you had the tape. You're not a fan, right?
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of.
Oh
Pierre
no.
Maguire.
So you know, so I know how tough draft day is, and you know, there's that's why you draft kids late and they have success and you're thrilled for them, and you know, it's a tough day for GMs.
Absolutely. That's where the pressure is. It's their Stanley Cup that day.
Yeah.
All right, Doug, we have for you from the Beach House Pompano and Beresco right across the street. Did you use the last one?
You know what? Jill and I went down there.
Isn't it great?
I thought it was in Boca.
No.
But eventually we found it. We went along the beach,
Sorry.
and you know what? We sat at the bar, and we had a great time. There was some people around there that just a couple of Canadians and a couple.
good.
But we had a great time at the bar, and we had a nice meal, and it was a great little spot.
Well, you're going back.
I
Thanks,
appreciate
Doug.
it, man.
Appreciate it.
Take Rimmer and make him pay for
Not
parking.
a chance. Like my buying days for Rimmer are long gone. They're over.
Appreciate it, Doug Maclean, original Panthers coach. We'll see you next week, everybody, here on the Cats and Bolts podcast.